I'm really pleased to see such a great turnout. I don't think I've seen any programs where every single seat has been taken and Courtney's pulling out more from their storeroom. So thank you so much for coming. And we have about 20 people at home on Zoom. So thank you all for being here to welcome today's speaker, Martha Molnar. An avid gardener, outdoors enthusiast, and big city transplant, as her publisher calls her, to Castleton, Vermont, Martha is the author of the 2022 Playing God in the Meadow. Environmentalist Bill McKibben called her book a lovely reminder of how you can see the world in an acre. Her 2014 book, Taproot, Coming Home to Prairie Hill, prompted the 7 Days newspaper critic to write that Martha demonstrates that, quote, no matter how many newcomers sit down and write about Vermont, the talented ones will still find something new to say. That's a very nice tribute. Martha spent most of her professional career in media, public relations, and marketing, and was a regular commentator on Vermont Public Radio. She has written for the New York Times, the Boston Globe, Mother Earth News, and Horticulture, Northern Woodlands, and Green Mountain Club magazines. In May of this year, she wrote a very interesting column for the Boston Globe's Ideas section called Please Don't Call It Dirt. She's currently at work on a book about seeds and invites you to share your suggestions about topics and any questions with her via her website and by email. And she's included these contact points in her slides. Martha will take questions from the Monshire and Zoom audiences after her presentation. So think of things that you'd like to have answered. And the Norwich Bookstore will be selling Playing God in the Meadow. They accept cash, check, and credit cards. Please welcome Martha Molnar. Oops. That works in. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Anne. Anne and I have been corresponding for about over a year. And here I am, and I've done this presentation to a number of garden clubs. Never one quite as big as this. Very impressive. Plus, I looked at your website, and you have more things going on than any other garden club I've ever looked at. So congratulations. So Anne introduced me. I won't take up any time talking about myself, except to say that this is not a science book. It's not a book about necessarily just about fields and meadows. It's a combination of science, memoir, nature, and so on. Reason being that I'm not a scientist, I was an English major, and I don't feel qualified to write a scientific book. On the other hand, I worked really, really hard to get a certificate in botany from the New York Botanical Gardens. I always say that took me more work than getting a master's in English, which is easy for me. This was hard. And I also worked for an organization that supported a science and technology university. So I got to work with a lot of scientists and I had to learn their language. So that's how I came to write this third book. The title kind of tells the story. Playing God in the Meadow is how it started. I felt like a goddess. You know, I can just walk out there and say, you are great, you stay. You gotta go. I don't like you. You don't look like you play well with others, so you need to leave. By the end of the story, I was no longer a goddess because I had to learn to live with all the weeds that we have in our meadow, which is much more than an acre, by the way. The meadow is about 30 acres. I don't recommend anyone start a 30-acre meadow. But I wanted to say how I learned to accept or tolerate my weeds, but the publisher wanted to be positive, so now I have to admire them. So in the beginning, and I just put this slide here because I like the painting, but in the beginning, we bought, my husband Ted and I, who's here, bought a 40-acre property in Castleton on a hilltop. And we were really enchanted with the 5,000 apple trees that were on this property. They were not in great shape, as you can see from this slide. They were actually dying. But we had no idea, and we also had no idea what it means to have 5,000 apple trees. And it's really not an advantage. It's really this great disadvantage because you need to do something with them. And so we partnered with the USDA and they helped us get rid of most of the trees on the hilltop. We still left a lot of them. This giant brontosaurus came one February day and just kind of chopped up every tree from the top down in about 5 minutes and turned it into wood chips. And this is what it looked like. And I was really bereft and said, what have I done? I've destroyed this beautiful place. And how will this ever recover? And my daughter, who was in college at the time and knew everything, said, don't worry, nature will make it into something beautiful, which I didn't believe. What's going on here? Oh, sorry. Yeah, this is what it looked like. It turned into a beautiful meadow. It really did. She was right. And not only did we have beautiful tall grass growing, but we also had lots and lots of beautiful wildflowers. These are two of our grandchildren. This is a few years back. They're now teenagers, so they're not quite as cute. But the flowers also, many of them are still there, but I have to tell you, and I'll talk more about this later. A meadow is not like any garden. It's not a static piece of nature. It changes all the time. So what you see here a decade or more ago looks quite different today, regardless of what you do or don't do. But for a while, this is what it looked like, and it was like living in paradise. And then the bobolink showed up. Has anybody seen a bobolink? So the bobolinks are endangered birds because they have no habitat left, or very little habitat. They used to live in New England when New England was mostly farmland, so there was plenty of room for them to come and build nests and raise young. But since then, there's been a huge change, and in Vermont specifically, it used to be 75% open land, and now it's 75% forest. And the open land where they have fields are being cut 3 times a year. So if you cut the fields, what do you think happens to the nests and the eggs? So our property is very much supported by various organizations, not financially, but they give us a lot of encouragement because it's one of the rare places that's a hilltop, which the birds like. They like to be on top of a hill, so they have a 360-degree view. And they need at least 25 acres, and we've got both of those conditions. So they're very happy there, and every May we have what sounds like thousands of birds, it's probably a lot less than that, come up from Brazil, and they settle there, they build their nests, they raise their young, and then about 7 or 8 weeks later, they're gone. But for those 8 weeks, they have a place to live. And everything was wonderful for a few years, and then we started getting some new uninvited guests. Anybody know what this is? Yeah, it's knapweed. Very pretty, right? It takes over a field in no time. And we got blackberries, which at least provide food for us. We like it. And then we got these guys. Do you know what this is?
Parsnip.
Yeah, it's poison parsnip. And I didn't know what poison parsnip is, having lived in the woods in a New York suburb. And the first summer I noticed them, there was a large clump, and I thought they were quite pretty, and I brought some in the house. And they are very showy. They're very pretty. The next summer, instead of a clump, there were multiple clumps. And I realized that this is not a good thing. So it was high summer, I ran out there and about 20 minutes later, I started feeling hot and itchy, and it continued. And finally, I went inside because I felt like I was burning in certain parts of my body. And I looked in the mirror, and sure enough, there were second-degree burns, because that's what poison parsnip does to you. And this was confirmed when I looked it up. Gruesome burns. Serious burns, etc. Well, I experienced that, so I know. So, by the way, I have to say, I've showed you 3 of the invasive plants, the blackberries, the knapweed, and the poison parsnip. We also have fields, if you don't cut them, of Canada goldenrod. I'm sorry, just goldenrod. And that's a native plant. So it's not only non-native plants that can invade a meadow, native plants can too. Like these guys, do you know what they are? That's thistle, and that's about the worst because it spreads by underground roots, rhizomes. And if you try to pull it up and you leave a root hair in the ground, the whole new plant grows. And the more you work at it, and I have a chapter in the book about that, the more it succeeds. The more you try to eradicate it, the more powerful it becomes. So it's a real problem. So once we realize that we have a problem, I began a really frenzied research project to try to figure out what to do. I called experts, I read a lot, I looked online, I asked other people who had fields like ours, and I didn't get any good answers, I have to say. There seemed to be very little out there that was helpful to me. So one of the things I discovered, first of all, it was somebody at the University of New Hampshire. I won't mention any names, but he was one of the experts I called. And his answer was, well, you just have to kill everything and start from scratch. I said, first of all, I don't know how you do that. Will you hire a helicopter to fly over you and spread poison? And then after you do all that, and then you plant new grasses and you have a wonderful meadow once again. What happens in 5 or 7 or 10 years? Won't it also be invaded? And his answer was, well, you have to keep at it. So I've been doing that. We've both been doing that for years. It doesn't quite work that way. Anyway, I didn't get good answers, but one of the things I discovered was that non-native weeds are being called all kinds of negative names. They're being referred to as alien, illegal, foreign, toxic. They're exotics, they're a menace, they're a plague. And some of them really are. I mean, I read an article about, have you noticed the Japanese knotweed that's growing everywhere?
Yes.
So that is such a toxic plant. I read this article about this couple in England where you can't sell a house once knotweed invades the area. But there, because of the climate, I guess, the knotweed grows right through carpeting, through wood floors, through cement, through everything into homes. And these 2 tragic people had their house invaded, couldn't sell it, their nest egg was in the house, and they literally committed suicide over poison parsnip. So some of them are really much worse than others, but all of them are being referred to with these names. And I found that a little bit disturbing because these are the kind of names that people are also being referred to. Both my husband and I are immigrants to this country. We came here with our parents as teenagers, and I don't like being referred to that way. So, also, I discovered a Nazi connection. You know, Hitler was a vegetarian and he was very into nature. And he wanted to make sure that Germany's famous Black Forest kept out every plant that wasn't native. And this was a piece of information that didn't sit well with me. I don't think it would sit well with anyone. And I started thinking about, well, you know, what is really native? What is really not native? What is alien? The answers were not there. Are weeds really bad? And I thought about this a lot. I mean, we look at dandelion. Is dandelion really bad? It's pretty. It has medicinal properties. You can make wine with it. You can make tea with it. I tried the tea. Has anyone tried dandelion tea? Yeah, it's good. Not as good as some others, but it's okay. So there are some good things about invading weeds. And when I talk about non-natives, I mean the ones that invade, the ones that don't play well with others, the ones that would take over our meadow and would render it uninhabitable for the bobolinks and other ground nesting birds, basically destroy it. So those are the ones I'm referring to. But there are some that are not so bad. For example, this is a picture of a forest in Puerto Rico where there was a lot of agriculture going on until the 1950s. And then everybody abandoned agriculture. It was no longer economically viable. So they left and the ground was just empty, sitting there under this baking sun. And then eventually all these non-native plants moved in. And they were pretty horrible things. There was one, forget what it's called now, but it's called white iris, and it spread 17 acres a year. If you can imagine that. So on the right is the forest as it looks today, and on the left is another piece of the land that was farmed a little longer. The one on the right is now a functioning habitat. It's a forest with animals and birds and insects and so on. It's a mixture of native and non-native. But the non-natives that came in, which are generally, as we know, tougher and longer lived and more successful than the natives, kind of broke up the ground. They created some moisture. They shaded the earth so that the natives could come back. And this combination works really well. And here's a close-up picture of the forest. In the background is the one that's already grown up, and the foreground is where it's starting to turn into forest. And by the way, we have non-native plants that we love. Apples. They come from Asia, Soviet Union at one time. Hydrangea that we love, and they grow really well in Vermont, right? They're non-natives. Ivy, which we admire on some buildings. My daughter lives in Oregon. Ivy there is a curse because of the climate. It just drapes over everything, like kudzu. So it depends where you live. So not all natives are terrible. And I was having lunch with a friend of mine who's a botanist and trying to ask, picking at her brains and trying to find out what to do and how to structure the book. And in the middle of lunch, she put her sandwich on and she said, well, you know what, Martha? I said, what? She said, a meadow is not native in New England. And I just sat there dumbfounded because of course she's right. A meadow is not native to New England. What happens to meadows in New England if you don't touch them? They turn to forests, right? The only meadows that survive are the ones that are being managed, like our meadow, or being cut for hay. They're the only ones. Natural meadows don't exist, or at least they don't exist for long. So, but we wanted our meadow. We still want our meadow. We like our meadow. It's beautiful. And what we're in effect doing is trying to keep natural succession from taking place. We're not allowing nature to do what it wants to do. So these were our options are to do nothing, but then we'll lose the meadow. Kill everything was what I was talking about before, which we opted not to do. So we opted to do number 3, ignore and focus. We cut it once a year. We don't dig them out anymore. We cannot dig because we found that digging plants out, the poison parsnip can be dug out, although it's a huge job. And we did it for about 5 years every summer. We spent our summers in the fields under the hot sun, pulling these things out and piling them onto a truck, which we filled 4 times the entire truck bed. So it is an option, but it's more work than we can do. Oh, and we tried to hire people. And sometimes we did get some young people to come and we paid them really well. And we gave them beer and we gave them lunch and I baked cake and I gave it to them. And I had them take cookies home. And you know what? Nobody ever came back. So that is not a good option. Nobody wants to do this work, and I don't blame them. I don't want to do this work either. So, and we tried to get the fire department to come and use our property as training grounds for teaching firemen how to put out fires, but they turned us down. And we don't want to kill the grass and the good flowers. So we opted for spot spraying. And it works really, really well. It's not particularly fun to walk around on 30 acres or so with a big backpack, very heavy, liquid is really heavy on your back. But it only kills that one plant that we spray and nothing else around it. So, and we are only focused on 3 plants. We ignore everything else. We are focused on the knapweed, on the poison parsnip, and the Canada thistle. Everything else can live there, because they're not destroying the meadow. So that's our solution for now.
What do you use to kill the plants?
It's a chemical spray, and I can tell you what it is. It's not because that kills everything. If you use Roundup, it kills the grass and everything else. So it's something. Do you remember what it's called? I'll try to remember and tell you. It just kills that one plant that you spray at and nothing else, which works well for us. So we do it because of all these things, the ecosystem services. The meadow is just full of bees and butterflies and moths and many, many birds, as I mentioned. And it's wonderful and we love it. And it gives us a lot of satisfaction. And it's beautiful. So we continue to do it. And by the way, I've noticed that, planting natives, it's wonderful to plant natives. And we have a lot of, the meadow is native. It has all native plants. But I do have a perennial garden, and that's a mixture of both. And I did write another piece for the Boston Globe about a couple of years ago, in which I said my thesis was that natives are wonderful and non-natives are wonderful too, if you can have both, because the pollinators do like the non-natives, not as much as the natives, but if you have enough space like we have, it's nice to have a perennial garden where you can choose the most beautiful plants, the roses and the iris and the dahlias and so on that we love, and also have lots of nothing but natives. And I couldn't believe the comments that came in. You would have thought I said something truly sacrilegious, like something really terrible against a whole large group of people. And all I said was, let's give both a chance. Let's not turn this into zealotry. It's not a religion, you know. Natives are great, but there's room for non-natives too. And I told the story of how this was precipitated. I met this man at the supermarket whom I know, and he said that he asked me if I want his flowers because he pulled out every last flower in his front yard. And this is in Rutland. So I said, well, how big is your yard? I mean, do you have acres? No, it was his whole property is a quarter acre. So and he wants to put in a meadow. I said, well, the meadow needs a little more than a little front yard to really work. And that's what precipitated this. I also try to tell people when I'm asked about meadows, when you read about it, when you read the instructions, when you talk to people, oh, you just stop mowing and you have a meadow. No, it doesn't work that way. And people just buy these wildflower seeds, native wildflowers, and just throw them down, and they think they'll have a meadow. No, it doesn't work that way. And a meadow is not work-free. It doesn't mean that you'll never have to work at it. In fact, in our experience, managing a meadow is way more work than cutting lawn. Much more. So if you want to build a meadow, first of all, it's also very expensive to build one. In the book, I mentioned how much it costs because I spoke to a couple of people who install meadows, and it's a very expensive project. And you have to sign a contract with them to manage it for the next 3 to 5 years. And that's a good thing because they know how to manage it and keep it going. After that, it's up to you, and and take it from me, it's a lot of work, but it's well worth it. So over time, I have become a much more patient God, and I tolerate a lot more, and I don't expect perfection, and I'm happy as long as I see that all the wildlife is happy in the meadow.
What's the minimum size you have to make a meadow?
I don't think it's a minimum size. I know that a front yard is not enough. So, I mean, visualize it, it's not managed, it's not planted like you'd plant a garden. So you want to have enough room for things to show. And the flowers are not there all at once. They come in at different times of the season. So if you have a very small plot, there'll be times when there'll be no color at all. So you need to visualize a large enough space that will allow you to have grasses and maybe some shrubs even, and small shrubs, and lots of flowers that will flower at different times of the year. I mean, I would say you'd need an acre, but it's just a guess. I'm not an expert on this. Okay. So I'm working on another book, and before I take your questions, I have a question for you. So the book is about seeds, and I'm wondering, for those of you who use seeds in your garden, vegetable garden or flower garden, what are some of the questions that you have, some of the things you'd like to know? For example, I started this book because I was ordering seeds, and I had been ordering them for years. And when I actually looked at the seed packet that came, one of them, and I started reading it, I said, I don't understand what half of this is. I don't really understand what it means. And when I looked back at the catalog, I realized that if you want to order tomato seeds, which I don't, there are pages and pages and pages of them. And how do you know what to pick? And how do you know what all those symbols are and so on? So that was my motivation. But what are some of the questions you might have about seeds that I could incorporate? If you can't think of any now, talk to me. Oh,
So I'm just, I'd be interested to learn more about the seed banks and the commercial seed industry, and what are the pros and cons to each.
I'd like to know how long seeds are viable. You buy a packet and you don't plant it. Can you plant it 10 years later, 5 years later, 2 years later?
Or even the ones that I saved from my flower garden. Like last year.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear.
Oh, when she mentioned about the vegetable seeds, I have the same question about my flower seeds.
How long are they viable?
Yeah, if I saved my columbine seeds and mallow and that sort of thing, how many years?
I can just tell you from experience, they're viable way longer than it says on the package.
Yeah.
Okay, there wasn't, no more questions, yes.
Yeah, I don't know, I don't order seeds from the catalog, I'll save my garden seeds, but I would be curious to know what seeds require winterizing in order to bloom the next season or a season after that.
Great.
And mine's very similar to what have all the different propagation methods for different seeds, because some want to be cold, some want to be slightly warm, some have to actually germinate on top of the ground, but in the dark. So you gotta put that, and there's a, what needs what, and how many different methods there are.
Yes,
And just, I'm interested in how, and which seeds are chemically treated and why.
And I know a lot of people are starting to be interested in seeds, like want to know where the seeds are collected and grown, because there seems to be growing evidence that they might be very specialized. So if you harvest your own seed in this area, they are likely to do better in this area than ones that are harvested in the Midwest.
oh, that's interesting. To source, yeah.
How do you plant various seeds? Because they come in different sizes, and larger seeds you can see planting, and some seeds are just so tiny, they look like tiny poppy seeds. So how do you plant those in the ground? Do you plant them in clumps? Do you need special equipment to plant them? And how do you cover them? And questions about just planting.
Right, when they give you carrot seeds, which are almost microscopic, and is a quarter of an inch, like, how do you do that? These are great questions, yes.
I just have one word, is that, it seems like the seed companies are like the fashion industry, right? Every year there's this new variety to try, but what about the heirloom seeds? What about the seeds that were original way back when? And is there value in promoting that or learning about what an heirloom seed is? How the Native Americans saved their seed and planted them before commercial seed industries came to be.
Great. These are great questions, really helpful, and
So when will the book be out?
that's a good question. What I don't have an answer to. I don't know. It's somewhere in when I describe myself as a writer, I always say I'm a foul weather writer. Because whenever the weather is nice, like today, there's no way you're gonna find me inside writing. So my writing is limited to bad weather, which means that it takes me longer than it should to get a book done. Plus, I really don't have answers. I'm not a botanist, I'm not a biologist. And so I need to do all the research to get answers to your questions, which is a good thing, because I like the research part much more than the writing part. I wish I could hire people to write it for me, like some of these famous authors. So I like the learning part, the research part, but as a result, and it's also good because I am learning along with you. So when you read my books, you are learning with me. I'm not just giving you information. I'm taking you on the journey and you're learning it more easily that way. But as a result, it also takes a lot longer. So this is how you can reach me. MarthaLMolnar@gmail.com is my email, and martha-molnar.com is my website. So if you have questions beyond what we're going to talk about right now, or if you have suggestions for the seed book, I'd love to hear from you.